Now, in this part, we're going to focus on evaluating with rational exponent. So let's take a look at the first example. We have 4 to the power of 3 over 2. So let's convert that into radical form. Now I'm going to write two forms. So we're going to have 4 to the third power inside the square root. Whereas the other one, we have 4 inside the square root, but the power of 3 is outside the parenthesis. Now let's focus on the left side. So we have the square root of 4 to the third. That means that the first thing when we're evaluating is that we're going to raise 4 to the third power. So 4 to the third power will be basically 4 times 4 times 4, and then we're going to write out the steps. And again, all of this is inside the square root. When you do 4 times 4 times 4, or 4 to the third power, that becomes 64. And the square root of 64 will be just 8. So we're evaluating, so we don't have to worry about plus and minus because again, we didn't have x equals, so that's fine. Or x squared equals. I'm just asking you to evaluate, so we're going to work with positive numbers here. So again, the square root of 64 is 8. Now, over here, we have the square root of 4 being raised by the third power. So when you write in this format inside the parenthesis, you're going to do the inside of the parenthesis first, meaning that you're going to do the square root of 4, which is 2, raise it to the third power. So when it's 2 to the third power, that basically means 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 times 2, or 2 to the third power, is also 8. So we did it in both different ways because of the form that we set up, but we still end up with the same answer, which is 8. Now, if you're working with small numbers, either forms works. Now, the difference between these two forms is if you have the exponent inside the radical, then you're going to have to simplify it inside the radical first, then do the root next. So in this case, I did 4 to the third power, which is 64, and then I did the square root of it, which is 8. Now over here, in the second form, inside the parenthesis is the square root of 4, and the exponent is outside the parenthesis. So meaning that we're going to do the root first, and then raise it by the exponent that's outside the parenthesis. So in this case, I did the square root of 4 first, which is 2, and then I raised it to the third power, which is 8. Now, again, if you're working with small numbers, either form works. But if you're working with big numbers, then I highly recommend that you do the root first, then raise it to the power. Whereas if you were working with big numbers and you're going to raise it by an exponent, you're going to have an even larger number, and then you have to do the root of it. It's going to be hard to do the root of a big number, whereas you can do the root of a smaller number. So if you're working with big numbers, I highly recommend that you do the root first and then raise it by the power. In this example, we have 81 to the power of 3 over 4. So let's rewrite it in the two forms. So the first form would be 81 to the third power inside the fourth root. Whereas in the other form, you're just going to have the fourth root on 81 first, and the whole thing is being raised by the third power. Now, I mentioned previously that if you're working with big numbers, it's always best to work with the root first and then raise it to the third power. So let's talk about this form. So the fourth root, meaning one number times itself 4 times, will equal to 81. So in this case, the fourth root of 81 will be 3. And then we still going to have the exponent outside the parenthesis, so 3 to the third power, meaning 3 times 3 times 3. So that's going to be 27. So 3 to the third power, or 3 times 3 times 3, would be 27. That's going to be my final answer. Alright, let me box that final answer, 27. Next, we're going to work on the second form, and I'm going to talk about the problems when working with the first form when involving with big numbers. So let's take a look. So we have the fourth root of 81 to the third power. So that means that we need to work with the inside first, inside the radical. So 81 to the third power, when you do 81 to the third power, 81 times 81 times 81, which I'm going to write it out. Inside the fourth root, you can imagine it's going to be a huge number. So 81 to the third power is going to be 531,441 inside the fourth root. Now, here is the problem. Now you have to figure out what number times itself 4 times will equal to 531,441. So that's going to be an issue because now you have to check all the numbers and have to multiply itself 4 times. That's a lot of work. But if you have a calculator, then you can definitely do the fourth root of this number, which will be 27. That's going to be my final answer. Again, like I said before, either form work, but the problem with the first form is that if you're working with big numbers, then you're going to use the exponent inside, and you're going to have an even bigger number, as you can see here. And it's going to be a bit hard to find the root of it if you're working with a huge number. Whereas in the other form, we did the root first, so we made the 81 become a smaller number. Now we're using a smaller number and raise it to the exponent that's outside of parentheses, which we got 27. So we got the same answer, it's just that it's a bit easier when you do the root first and then raise it to a exponent that's outside of parentheses. Because again, when you did the root, you get a smaller number. It's easy to work with smaller numbers. Whereas you have a big number, you're raising it to even a larger number, now you're trying to find the root of a huge number, which is very hard to do, and it's going to involve with a lot of work.